everyone, it's Austin Solomon, the Solomon Group at Coldwell Banker, doing a quick episode of the Real Wausau Real Estate Show. Today I'm joined by Dustin Vreeland from Vreeland Land Surveying. Did I say that? Is it Vreeland Land Surveying?
And engineers.
And engineers. All right, Dustin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Vreeland's been around for a long time. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the business.
Yeah, so we've been around for 70 years. My grandpa started it back in the 70s, and just been cranking away. We're a family business.
Yeah.
My dad, it's me, my dad, and my brother-in-law, and my mom working right now. I'm a professional engineer. We're just working on getting my surveying license right now, and just keep moving on from there.
That's awesome. We were talking a little bit before we started that that you're working on what is it technically called again? It's the license that you're getting. It's the
professional land surveyor license.
Okay.
Is that what we are? I'm a professional engineer, which works right with professional land surveyors.
That's awesome. Is that what your dad? So is that what your dad has now?
Yeah, he's a professional land surveyor. Yep.
Okay. Sweet. So tell us a little bit about what is a survey? Just some of the basics for some of the people listening. What is a survey? Let's start there.
So a survey is just locating boundaries of what you own.
Yep.
There's all different types. There's subdivisions where there's already subdivided and your parcel has specific lot name, or there's surveys where it's a meets and bounds description, where somebody just wrote up, you own the north 100 feet of the south 200 or east 200 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just have to find where your boundaries are and retrace what the original surveyor or lawyer or even the person that wrote the description up.
Right.
I mean, even back in the day, people used to just write them up themselves with tape measures.
Yeah.
That's where the description came from. So.
Back in the day, there was no GPS.
Nope.
Yeah, exactly. Then that's where a lot of things used to run off of fence lines.
Right.
That was kind of the way, you would just fence things off, and that was kind of how people knew.
Yep, and a lot of fence lines, that's how they try to do it, and they'd say, okay, it's 400 feet, and they'd try to put a fence line there. Well, then you find out that fence line wasn't correct, so there's a lot of that too.
Right, and that's where you come in to try to sort that out.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so for a buyer that's considering purchasing a property with considerable acreage, how can the survey be helpful? Why would it be important for a buyer to think about getting a survey?
So we tell everybody to have a survey done, whether it's us, whether you hire someone else, it doesn't matter who. Then you know exactly what you're buying, and you know exactly where your boundaries are.
Right.
Whether it's a lot of land or little land, it can make a difference on what you want to do.
Yep.
I mean, if you want to plant trees, or if you're buying for hunting and recreation, you know where to put up stands without putting on your neighbor's property, and making sure that you're staying in your own lane, basically, so that you're not affecting somebody else.
Right. It's peace of mind to know, hey, this is mine.
Right.
I don't have to worry about, encroaching on someone else's land.
Exactly, and that's what I was going to say is encroachments. What if your neighbor's got a shed up and all of a sudden find out that the corner of it's on your land? It just gives you that peace of mind knowing that this is your property, this is where it is. And
right, absolutely. So walk us through the surveying process. What kind of goes into to having a survey done? So do you come out to the property, you got to look things over, walk us through what the whole process.
Yeah, so what we do is we get some information from a client, usually when they call.
Yep.
We do a bit of research on it, see if it's ever been surveyed before, see if neighbors, see what kind of information there is from the county even for their section summaries and all that. Once we do that, and we come out to the site and we survey it.
Yep.
We do a lot of the work in the office nowadays is we're computing, getting to it so that we know where to find the boundaries are before we're out there, whether there's existing pipes or not. Once we're out there, we are searching for property corners. That's the number one thing we got to do. If there's something that exists, we got to verify it and make sure that it's correct. And then from there, if we don't find anything, then we set them, and then that's how we go about it. There are times where there's nothing and you have to use the whole block to make it, if we're in the city like that, where you're using back of curbs to decide where people's property boundaries are, because that's how they were established.
Yep.
From there, once we have the survey done in the field, we locate buildings, any permanent structures, your driveway if it's there, your well, your septic, all that.
Yep.
And then once we're done with that, then we draft up a map, and then we get you a copy of that map, so you have a visual record of what we did out there.
Right. So on the corners, are you like, let's say that there's a pin, and it's like a couple inches underneath like the turf. Are you kind of setting another like wood stake there? Are you like tying out, like exposing that pin, or?
So we dig out, find the pin, we locate where it is, and then we usually mark it with like a flag and a wood stake, usually about 4 feet tall, so it's easy for you to see.
Sure.
Paint it up, mark it up, so that you know exactly where it is, and so you can find it.
And this is just out of curiosity, because I know sometimes those wood stakes, eventually they fall over, or I've seen it too, like where like one is just sitting like in a corner, and there's it's like laying down, and there's like some a tuft of grass, over there. Do you sometimes set irons too, like so that it's it doesn't have to be redone if that wood stake were to like be pulled?
We won't put another iron in if there's an existing one already there.
Sure.
What we recommend to everybody, if they're really concerned about losing that wood stake, 'cause that wood stake's gonna make it. Yeah, it depends on the area, but it could make it a couple days even, depending on your neighbors. So
that's hilarious. Yeah.
So we tell them to usually put something more permanent, like either like those plastic ones that mark up your driveway in winter, because those don't disappear unless somebody takes them out, or even a fence post. Okay. So those metal fence posts don't disappear because they're hard to get out.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. If someone was worried about it. Yeah. Yep. No, that sounds great. And then when you go back, then you draft up a map, and you. Depending on how detailed you want to go with the map, you could, like you say, you identify the permanent structures, and then, do you ever like identify? I've seen where they identify like wetlands and like other structures too. Like what kind of things do you?
Yeah, typically we show floodplains on it if you're in a floodplain area, wetlands if there's wetlands on it, just to give you an idea. And per the code, we're supposed to show those, so it just makes it better for everybody.
Sure.
They're not the exact boundaries; they're just estimated based on DNR and FEMA and.
Sure.
And then we can get as detailed as you want on a map. I mean, if you want us to show every tree on the property, that's a possibility. But
it might just cost you more.
There's going to be cost more for that.
Exactly. So. No, that makes sense. Yep. How long does it take to record a survey? Whose responsibility is it to record that survey too? That's a big deal as well, especially if I've ran into that too. If you're selling a parcel if you're changing a parcel, a lot of times it has to, you have to get it approved with the township and record it.
Right.
Before it's official. So tell us a little bit about how long does it take to record a survey? What should you kind of expect?
So there's a lot of different things that can happen with that. There's rezones, if you're rezoning the property, so you're splitting off just the farmhouse and it's in a zoning where you have to rezone it. I mean, you're looking 3 to 4 months to do that, because you got to go through that whole process with the township and the county and all that for rezoning. Yep. CSMs, depending on what you're doing, some of them need approval, some of them don't. I mean, if you're splitting off, just like another example, like a house, but it's in the right zoning district and the town needs to review it, this county needs to review it. I mean, you're looking a couple weeks to a month, maybe 2 months, depending on their schedule of the township and how they do it. There's some townships that are pretty good. They do their town board and their planning commission a week to 2 weeks apart, so you can usually get it out within a month. But then there's other ones where it's going to be 2 months to do it.
Right. Yep.
And then there's what was the other one? And there's also plat surveys, which that's just retracing your boundaries.
Okay. So that doesn't have to be approved or anything.
Nope.
Yeah. That's basically just knowing what you got.
Yep. And then there's also then big chunks of land of CSMs where you're splitting off, say, 240s from each other, or 40 split in half, 220s. Yep. There's no review other than the county surveyor, and there's no approvals. All he does is review it, approve it, and it's out. So then you're looking at, maybe 10 days.
Sure.
Give or take. So
that can be advantageous. Yeah. Yep. This is kind of just a random question, but what do you think about, so a lot of times people are like, well, I'm going to buy a 40, I'll split it up into 4 chunks and I'll sell them all and I'm going to make some money.
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, there's nothing stopping you doing that.
Yeah.
There are rules though, and you'd have to have a road on 3 of the 4 sides then, because you have to have a minimum of 66 feet of access at most points, especially in Marathon County.
Yep. Yeah. So there's more that goes into it than just like what meets the eye, and
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yeah, so there has to be minimum frontages for certain townships. Have minimum frontages that you have to have. There's minimum, like I said, 66 feet of access to any point.
Yep. No, that makes sense. Yeah. So once you guys do the survey and you complete it, when is it considered like official?
Once it's recorded, then it's official for the survey part. But you don't own it. That is not changed until there is a transfer of ownership in there, because a survey map is good, but it doesn't do anything if there's never been a transfer in ownership of it or transfer in deeds.
Right. So if you're buying a property, once you close on it, that would be the time that it's transferred over to the new owner.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So let's talk Marathon County specific. That's where most of our listeners are from. What are some common municipal or zoning requirements that may limit how an owner may split their property? I know you talked a little bit about that, in our past example, but any other things that might be good to know?
Right. So we got some townships that are farmland preservation, and so that's a minimum of 35 acres.
Yep.
So now if you want to get anything less than 35 acres, you got to go through the whole rezone process, paying the fees. I mean, there's times where you can get that to work, but they also have ruling of saying, no, we're still not going to allow it.
Right. That's like Town of Marathon.
Right.
That's one of those that...
and Town of McMillan's another big one with farmland preservation. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Both of those two are big ones on farmland preservation, and they want to keep their acreages as big as possible for farmland.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. Any others that might be? That's a really good example. I never put those dots together of like farmland preservation. I knew that 35 acres was the minimum, but now I got those two pieces.
Yep. Yeah. So then there's like general agriculture ones that aren't in farmland pres, and that has to be a minimum of 10 acres.
Yep.
So I mean, you're still looking at big chunks of land where you have to keep minimum acreages, and like I said, there's always rezone options.
Yep.
But there's never guaranteed when you go to a rezone.
Right. It has to get all that, that approval.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great one. I guess another question here too was what as I'm reading through the questions, I'm like, oh man, that's a great question. My sister kind of prepped a couple of questions. How does it work with like taxes? So if you split off, a lot of times we'll see, like someone selling a property, a house is on 30 acres and they're like, Austin, we want to sell the house on 10, right? It'd probably be good to get the surveyor involved right away to get that process going.
Right.
How does it work with, and you can tell me if you know or not, but how does it work with like property taxes? I guess how do they, is there some things to consider there? Like, I guess I'm just thinking about this in my head. The property taxes would probably change at the beginning of the year when they, when everything's kind of readjusted. But
right. So property taxes really aren't affected by splitting up land, from our understanding and what we've been told. Surveying off parcels isn't, other than you're going to have 2 tax bills until you sell that.
Right.
That's it. Other than that, from what we've been understood, unless there's a reassessment on the house and stuff like that, well, then that might change your tax bill.
Right.
But other than that, from our understanding, we've been just told that it's pretty much your taxes are going to stay the same as if you're just dividing land off.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. I have seen what about, I guess this would be a good question is, and I don't know if you know the answer or not, but if you change, so let's say that you go from agricultural to, you split an agricultural down into, smaller chunks. Because that's one of the benefits of having the ag land is the taxes are so low.
So that might change.
That'd probably be one of those
positive though.
Yeah, probably be a reassessment there.
That'd probably be a reassessment if you're going into a different zoning district.
Yep.
They'd probably request that.
Yeah. Let's talk about GIS mapping. Let's talk about Onyx. And we were just laughing before because a lot of people do like Onyx. That's for people that don't know, that's an app that you can get. A lot of realtors love it. I haven't gotten on board with Onyx yet, but I'm thinking about maybe it's
I use it.
You use it. There you go. Well, what it is, it's an app, and it allows you to kind of walk through. It shows if you're at a property, right? You can see where you're at on a satellite view, and your phone is a little dot on the map. It kind of shows you the boundaries and stuff. It's pretty cheap. It's like, you can get the app and
I think there's a monthly subscription now, but
Okay.
there's also the DNR one now that I found out that's free. So I've been using that one more. But yeah,
well, if a surveyor's using that one, I might look into that too. That's awesome.
yeah. So the GIS mapping and Onyx, the DNR's website, those are all just references. They're good reference material. They're good to look at to give you an idea.
Yep.
They're not perfect. There are some that they're right on. Like you'll go out there and that GIS map looks perfect.
Yeah.
Usually newer stuff is what makes it look good.
Yep.
But there are times where, we did one down in Stratford area, and it looked like lot lines were running right through middle of people's houses. We had clients calling us, asking us to come take a look at it and say, hey, is my neighbor's shed on my property?
Yeah.
Went out there and looked, and we found the iron pipes from the original surveyors, and no, the house or the shed wasn't on the neighbor's property. It's just that the GIS mapping was off.
Yep.
And that's easy to happen. I mean, they're using the survey information, rebuilding it on their GIS mapping, and they're trying their best to make it fit on top of the map. Like I said, again, it's a reference, it's not an absolute. That's what we're hired to do, to make sure that it's in the right locations. Right,
absolutely.
And then the same with Onyx. I mean, the better phone service you have, the more accurate your location is.
Yep.
But we followed a guy that taped up his line. He swerved by his Onyx app, and he went 20 feet one way and then 20 feet back the other way, and then onto his property and back onto the neighbors, swerving back and forth. And I just asked him, hey, did you watch what you were doing behind you?
Yeah.
And he said no. So we turned around and looked, and his lines were zigzagging.
Okay, he just was going on his Onyx.
Yeah, because he was on his Onyx. We were in bad phone service, and that's just what the line looked like on his phone when he thought he was walking straight, but he really wasn't.
He was marking it as he goes.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I guess, so tell us a little bit about, like, give us a fun story. Like, that's pretty, the Stratford one is pretty interesting. I'm sure, like, those homeowners were relieved to know that they were okay. Tell any fun stories or things that are, any good ones out there.
Yeah, we get all sorts of funny stuff that happens to us out there. That's the GIS mapping ones. Those are interesting ones when you get to sites like that, because the homeowners just see a relief. You see it instantly in their face, be like, no, this is where it is. And they're just like, oh. And there's times where you get in some of these swamps where all of a sudden you're chest deep in water, and you didn't realize that you're going to be that deep. You thought it was only about knee high, and then next thing you know, all of a sudden you're just gone.
Yeah.
That just happened to us a couple weeks ago to our new guy.
Oh,
it was
man.
pretty funny.
Did you have to pull him out of there?
No, he was able to crawl out.
Oh, man.
It was pretty entertaining.
A couple weeks ago, it must have been pretty cold.
Yeah, it was pretty cold.
His day was cut short.
Yep, pretty much. Our day was pretty much done after that one. You get into tag halters, and all of a sudden you're crawling on your hands and knees because the stuff's so overgrown. We find all sorts of funny stuff out there when you're walking through the woods.
Yeah, you just never know. And that's the interesting thing. So as far as cost goes, it all kind of depends on, what are you navigating? Like, it's one thing if you're on a small city lot, like you say, that a couple corners are easily identifiable, or if you're like surveying an 80-acre parcel out in the middle of nowhere and it's thick as ever,
right?
That's going to be more, obviously more to do.
Yep. Yeah. So every survey is different. There's no set cost that we can just be like, yeah, it's going to be this much, or it's going to be about this much. Every job is just different. We got to look at the originals. You get some of the stuff in the city of Wausau here. It was done in 1901, and it's never been touched since then. Well, now what are we going to find when we go out there?
Right.
Are we going to find irons or no? Most of the time we're not going to. So now we're rebuilding an entire block instead of just rebuilding your lot. We have to go look at every one of your neighbors on that block to see if there's anything there for us to find record of. You get on some of these bigger tracks out in 40 acres, 80 acres. Those are usually a little bit easier for the purpose of retracement.
Yep.
Because usually you're just following the original surveyors and the section corners that are maintained by our county surveyor. So that stuff's easier to retrace, but then it's also a little bit more difficult to do, because are we crossing a creek? Are we going through thick woods? Are we underneath the pine tree plantation? Everything, when we're doing our research, that's when we're able to figure out a best estimate cost that we're going to be able to give you to do the survey.
Yep. Yeah. What about in the city? Like, I've seen a lot of times these older city lots, like East Hill, for example, there's a lot of like stone walls, and a lot of times it's like, man, whose wall is it?
Right.
That's a common question, and kind of everyone's like, well, no one really knows. It was assembled probably 100 years ago. We don't know
when the first house was built.
yeah. We kind of just take turns maintaining it if it needs anything.
Right, and that's good if you have neighbors that can agree to that.
Yep.
The only way to define whose it is having a survey done,
right.
And then you can decide whose and who has to maintain it and who doesn't have to maintain it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you got neighbors like that where you guys can just agree to maintain it together, that's the best way to always.
That's the best thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's where I think a lot of times, most of the time you're probably, like you say, this stuff comes up where maybe you have a small encroachment of like a fence. It's within a couple inches, or, you have a shed corner that's on your property. And most of the time it's okay if you got, a new neighbor, but that's when, if someone new moves in, you don't know how they're going to,
right.
respond to that.
Right. So that's why if you're good with your neighbors and say, you bought the parcel and you and your neighbors are friends and the existing shed that you bought it with is on the neighbors, best to do it to clean it up while you two are friends before somebody else moves in, and then all of a sudden it's not a friendly relationship anymore. Right. And now they're saying you got to move your shed, and you're saying this shed's been here before I bought it, and now you guys are arguing over this corner of this shed. And instead you could have probably had it cleaned up through a surveyor, just doing a new CSM saying, hey, I'm just going to purchase a foot from you, 2 feet from you, just so that this is on my property now, and then we won't have any issues.
There you go. Then that's something that that's something that obviously if you're thinking ahead and that's an issue that you have, it might be good to explore like what does that cost? What does it look like? If you're thinking about selling and you know about one of those things.
Right.
Maybe something that or you move that shed,
Right. Or you just move the shed if you can. Yeah. There are some sheds that you just can't move though. So,
right.
That's funny. Yep.
Any other pieces of advice as far as, for someone that's buying or selling, anything that you've seen that, like tips or tricks, things to consider?
I just, like I said at the beginning of this, I'd recommend just getting a survey done.
Yeah.
Again, you can get a survey with us, you can get a survey with anyone else. It just makes everything, unless you know where the pins are and you've seen all 4 of them and you can clearly define where they are and point them out to someone.
Yeah.
But otherwise, just I would recommend always just get a survey done, because then you know what you're selling, you know what you're buying, and then a lot of times you can put it right into the closing cost with it. So then it just gets put in there and everybody's happy at the end of it. And nobody gets surprised by what's going to come up from it. It's
certainly a perk. If a property was recently surveyed, like I'll always include the map and the associated docs to let people know. It's a perk to have that. It's like, it's one less if or unknown.
Right.
And
then if you ever want to build a fence, you already have the survey map ready to go and you're able to put up your fence.
Yep. And a lot of times the city of Wausau requires that a survey is done, or at least staking.
At least some sort of known point.
Yeah.
The city will do some of it. They will see if there's any points that they have on record.
Sure.
But a lot of times if you want to put it right on the property line, they might require you to get a survey done.
Yep.
And then there's a lot of fencing companies too that'll be like, I'm not doing the survey I'm not putting up this fence without a survey because your line is irregular. It's not a straight line with perpendicular with the road.
Right.
So
I'm sure the fence company too, I'm sure they've had those calls where, they get a complaint from the neighbor. It's like, oh, you put a fence on my property.
Yep.
And they're like, nope, the neighbor told me I was good. Well, you're not good. And then
right. And the fencing company doesn't want that liability anymore. Not with all the information we have these days, unless and a lot of them can find the pipes themselves in newer subdivisions. But you get some of these old ones and they're just not comfortable putting up a fence anymore because of their liability of putting it on the neighbors.
Do you ever just do like lot or corner locations, like just staking? Like, is that an option too, just to have like the corners marked?
Right. Yep. So we can just locate the corners. We can stake lines. We can even just stake one line for you if that's what you're looking to do. If you're just concerned about, your neighbors putting up some landscaping on your side, and you just want to know, well, did they put their landscaping on my side?
Yep.
And we can just do one line. I mean, we can even come find one corner if you wanted us to.
Sure.
It's not a problem. It's just there's always a cost involved, all of it, and it's for us to do your whole lot. To do one corner is almost about the same, because one corner finding that one corner. We still have to do all the same research. We still have to do all the same computations to find it, and we still have to check your corner and maybe another corner to verify that that is in the right spot.
Yep.
So at that point, at least we have to find a minimum of 2 to 3 points just to verify to make sure that that is the correct lot corner.
Sure. Might make sense just to get it all done at that point.
Yep.
Yeah. Sweet. All right. Well, Dustin, thanks for thanks for joining us and being a guest on the show. Is this the first time you've been on a podcast?
It's the first time I've been on a podcast.
Hey, well, you rocked it. Thanks for coming in and bringing value to us and the listeners. So
thanks for having me.
Right on.